Thanks so much for having me. I think this is a great crowd. So my name is Joe Cloughley, and I'm a product designer. And my topic is product design in the age of AI. So by show of hands, how many people in here are product designers? Okay, a good number of you. Um, a lot of what I covered tonight is going to be about product design, but I also think it applies more broadly to all sorts of designers and really any creatives. And with that, let's take a look at some slides. So buckle up. There's going to be a lot of generative art in my presentation today. I went a little crazy with it. Here's kind of what we're going to go through. I'm going to talk about a little bit more about me and why I'm qualified to speak on designing an AI. And then I'm going to talk about the startup that I work for. It's called Weights and Biases. And then I'm going to spend the majority of time talking about challenges of being a product designer in the age of AI, and then how to meet those challenges. So I've got a bunch of advice and tips. And then at the end, we'll do a Q&A. Okay, so about me. I'm a former front-end engineer turned product designer, and I've been designing for about 15 years. For the past 8 years, I've been focused on designing machine learning experiences for machine learning teams. So at Figure 8, I designed experiences for collecting training data. At Meta, I designed experiences to help their machine learning teams code author, write their code, write their applications. At Weights and Biases, where I currently am, we focus on experiences for machine learning experimentation. So throughout my design experience, I've designed many points along the ML ops pipeline. So basically all the points that it takes to bring AI into real-world production. So like I said, I've spent a lot of time designing experiences for those who make ML, but I've also designed experiences that are powered by ML. So let's call them smart features. I've also used ML a lot to make myself a better designer. And that's more easier today than it's ever been. So simply put, I use AI to design AI for those who make AI, which is, you're going to hear that word AI a lot in this presentation. So most of the presentation I'll be focused on like what it means to design experiences for those who make ML, but I'm also going to call out like when I've worked on a smart feature or used ML myself. So let's talk a little bit about Weights and Biases. I'm going to talk about the platform, and as I talk about it, just listen for like what you might think the challenges would be of being a designer in this space. So our customers and users are machine learning teams, and we work with some of the leading names in AI, including OpenAI, NVIDIA, and Meta. And we support ML teams across like all different industries, agriculture, education, defense, healthcare, you name it. It's a business-to-business company, and it's software as a service. One thing that we're really proud of is that it only takes a little bit of code to get started, to start working with our platform. This is a screen grab of our product. At its core, our platform allows ML teams to track machine learning experiments and then visualize the results. So it essentially creates a system of record of all your experimentation, and you can sort of go back and look at all that you've done to arrive to the models you've created. So just a quick tour here. The listing on the left is every experiment that the team has done in this project. And then more in the canvas area, you see a lot of charts and panels. Every visualization represents a metric that you're tracking across every experiment. So you can see how something like accuracy or loss has changed with all your experimentation. So I also want to mention, we launched a brand new product in the last year. It's called Weave, and it helps those who are experimenting with LLMs. Same idea, experimenting with it. How do you arrive to an LLM application that you're really happy with? We also have products to manage models that are in deployment, model versioning, and then helping to manage the hardware that you run your experiments on. And right now, this is a big area of focus for me at the company. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a bit. Okay, so let's get into the main part, which is Basically, what challenges have I found in this industry, and then my advice on how to meet them. So I'm going to cover 6 challenges. And the first is designing in a fast paced industry. And I wanted to start with this because it's one of the most defining factors in the industry we're in. It changes every day. In the AI industry, product roadmaps shift constantly. Sometimes it's weekly. And that can be frustrating, but shifting with it strategically is absolutely essential. So, my first piece of advice is don't skip the blue sky designs. It's our job as designers to provide an optimized solution and to dream for the company about what is possible. We essentially provide vision, and I think that's where we build the most credibility for design. So, a product leader once told me that if you design 50% and put that in front of people, you might get 25% built. But if you design 100%, you might get 50% built. So keep that in mind. In a fast paced environment, when you can, resist the urge to aim for the MVP for the sake of moving fast. All that said, expect the MVP design. So the blue sky design will quickly get cut down, and not because it isn't right, but because your team is beginning to think about the cost and the time to build it. So be ready to show that you know about the cost and time to build it. Show that you're ready to go with a scaled back design, and that you're essentially 2 steps ahead of the rest of the team. And I think if you share blue sky designs and you are ready with MVP designs, you're working your strategic design muscles. Next advice, optimize for your craft. So I think these days we hear a lot. We hear less focus maybe on specific design tools or craft. We talk a lot about soft skills, communication, and strategic thinking. But mastering your craft and your tools is a real strength in a fast paced industry. So componentize your designs to allow for faster iteration, invest in a design system, learn hotkeys and the latest Figma features. These investments are absolutely worth making. And just as an example, the team I'm on, we maintain 2 sets of components, one for our light theme and one for our dark theme. And then we explored Figma variables, which is relatively new. And it actually allowed us to cut the number of components in half because we no longer had to maintain 2 sets. And it's absolutely saved us time in creating new components and then maintaining the components we already have. Save all designs. This really isn't hard to do these days, especially with Figma. But designs don't get shelved because they're not solving the right problem. They don't get solved. Just as uncommon, customer problems don't really just go away overnight. Designs get shelved because there's a shuffle in priority. And that's a staple of moving fast that this will happen. The problems you solve will be waiting after maybe a quarter or a year or 5 years, and do what you need to do to keep designs intact and well organized to be found later. So the next challenge number 2, is designing on the cutting edge and what that means. Again, it's a defining factor of the industry we're in. So emerging technology, particularly in AI, is exciting because we don't fully know where it's heading. We're building the plane as it's flying, so to speak. So how do we innovate where there's no established precedent? Possibly most importantly is getting close to your users and customers. And this is really key to all product design. It's key to a lot of design. But it comes even more important when the technology is so new. If you're working in an early industry, the customers you support are as well. So collaborate with them as early adopters and innovators. And just some practical solutions here. At the company I'm at, we have set up shared Slack channels with our customers so we can really communicate rapidly with them. Build strong relationships with your product managers. Often they're going to be the ones who are closest to users and customers. And then join customer calls whenever possible. Stay informed externally. There's so many resources out there. So find ones that sort of speak to you or that are good information resources for you. And I'm going to recommend a couple podcasts here. There's 2-minute papers, which provides bite-sized summaries of new ML research. So when a paper comes out that's maybe hard to understand, this is a good one to sort of digest it for you. Thursday, which covers the latest AI news weekly. At Weights and Biases, we also have our own podcast. It's called Gradient Descent. And it's hosted by our CEO, and he interviews people who are making products in AI, usually other founders and CEOs. And this is great to listen to if you also design and build AI products. A lot of helpful tips in there. And then lastly, I'm going to recommend my own podcast. Me and my co-founders started AI FYI, and we demystify AI mostly for those who aren't in tech. So we joke that it's a podcast about AI for your mother. Stay informed internally. So you definitely want to pay attention to internal conversations and leadership's evolving focus. So listen for the new terms or buzzwords that are being said, as they often indicate a shift in direction or priority, especially in a remote work environment. This is super important. You just want to ensure that you remain aligned with the company's cutting edge goals. Watch the competitive space. So AI is on the cutting edge, but something that's unique about this is that it's already quite a crowded playing field. So look closely at what others are doing, what they're working towards, and then try to understand their choices and where they're coming from. There's also lessons to be learned from adjacent industries. So weights and biases is a system of record for your machine learning models, and GitHub, as you probably know, is a system of record for your code. And I reference it all the time to sort of understand what might be a good pattern or interaction to use, to borrow from or be inspired by. All right, challenge 3, designing where deep technical knowledge is required. This is something that's not unique to AI. If you're a product designer and you're dealing with engineers who are very, very smart, it can be overwhelming and kind of scary. 15 years in the industry, I deal with that every day. If you do work in AI, put on top of that the fact that maybe your customers and users are also extremely technical. So I mentioned at Weights and Biases, I focus on experiences for folks who manage hardware. I'm a UX expert, not a compute hardware expert, and yet I need to know about compute hardware quite a bit, so that people trust my designs and know what I'm talking about. So what are some things that you can do if you find yourself in a similar position? Use the product yourself, super important. It's very hard to find the time to do this often, but don't just hear about the challenges you're solving for, find and experience them, and you'll be a leader in your teams. It's one of the most impactful practices that you can do as a product designer in a technical domain. Leverage AI as your expert neighbor. So asking for help and understanding is a daily occurrence as a designer in a technical space. And tools like ChatGPT can act as your always available technical expert. And I find it invaluable for asking very detailed technical questions that I might otherwise bother my colleagues with or hesitate to bother my colleagues with and then never know. So keep that one in mind. This is a good one. I especially think if you're starting a new job, and that's to maintain a personal glossary. So every time you come across a new word, or maybe even a new company you've never heard of, there's a new company popping up every day, make a note of it and look it up later. Over time, you'll notice you're adding fewer and fewer new terms, which signals that you're getting more familiar with the area and the industry and the space. And this is also something that you can share out to help others who are learning. So know what you don't know. I sort of alluded to this one, but it's really important to embrace gaps in your knowledge and acknowledge them. Uh, you'll be asked tough questions. It's okay to say, I don't know, or I'll get back to you, and then to go find the right answer. In fact, admitting when you're unsure builds trust, in what I call the trust bank, which I didn't come up with, but it's a metaphor I like quite a bit. So every time you're honest about not knowing something, you make a deposit in the trust bank. And if you sort of fake it and maybe get caught, more than a little will be taken out of your trust bank. And you want to sort of maintain that with your team members. Okay, let's talk about challenge number 4. And I've got 2 more after this. So designing for non-traditional interfaces. I wasn't really sure the right word to use here. When I think of a traditional interface, I'm thinking something maybe like Airbnb, browser-based, very designed for emotions, very click-driven. Oftentimes, you might see this with like a business-to-customer site. Those in AI often work in more technical interfaces. So this is code, terminals, notebooks, APIs, SDKs, spreadsheets, very data-heavy interfaces. So what should you keep on top of when you're designing these spaces? Go where your users go. This is really important. I learned this firsthand when designing at Meta. So when I joined the company, I really only had experiences designing for browser-based experiences. And what I quickly learned was that ML engineers care quite a bit about being close to their code, moving very efficiently, having things like hotkeys. And what ultimately happened was that most of my designs there ended up being VS Code extensions, and VS Code is the code editor that is preferred there. So it makes sense. It was extremely valuable to capitalize on this tool that all their developers already used and to bring the experience into that. So when you start out on a project, I'd say keep that top of mind and sort of question the medium where you're going to be designing. Embrace utilitarian design. So this kind of gets into like the Airbnb of it all that I was talking about. It's always good to strive for aesthetic design that ignites the emotions of the user, but you may need to embrace something that's a little bit more utilitarian. So what that means is layouts might be clean, minimal, and functional, not visually expressive, not vibrant, not decorative or animated. Actions, they may be keyboard shortcuts, quick commands, very minimal clicks, not designed for exploration or play. Information architecture, strictly focused on what helps users achieve their goals. Minimizing distractions, it's not focused on storytelling. And then feedback and error messages, make sure they're clear, concise, and actionable, and not about a softer tone or humor or about reducing frustration. So I also want to talk about the value of including options for customization. So technical users often appreciate customization and flexibility and preference in how they interact with a product. So hotkeys or UI themes is a great example here. Now, weights and biases, a lot of our users interact with our SDK in the terminal. And we recently explored the idea of verbosity levels. So other products do this, but basically in an SDK's output, you might prefer to it to be very silent, or you might prefer a lot of output. We also explored the idea of like a learning mode, where if you're just beginning to learn the platform, it's going to spit out a lot of like helpful documentation and links. So I thought this was a really cool example of how you can provide some customization to the experience. Remember that documentation can be an important part of the experience. So I've worked on so many technical experiences that would fail without companion documentation. And these are like the docs that you would leave the platform to go and explore. So you want to understand when the intuitiveness of the product will not cut it, and when it's time to send folks off to the documentation and how their experience is going to be like understanding that documentation, particularly as they come back into the product. All right, challenge number 5 is designing for explainability. And this one's very particular to AI. As AI matures, explainability will become very important for trust, safety, and compliance. And some would say it very much already is. So many AI models function like black boxes, and it's hard to tell what's going on inside of them. So part of a designer's role is to break down complexity and expectations, to set expectations. So why shouldn't this design responsibility extend to demystifying AI? My first piece of advice is to specialize in visualizations. So designing in the AI world means designing for data, which is often very complex, very overwhelming, and hard to draw meaning from. It's difficult for users to grasp. And I believe having the skill to create charts and visualizations is acutely valuable right now. Many companies are looking for this specifically from designers. So I'd recommend adding it to the skill set if it isn't already. So when designing for explainability, design sandbox and playground experiences. So an AI is inherently non-deterministic, meaning that you can run it many times and you'll get a different answer every time. Also, evaluating the success of a response can be very subjective. It's not always clear if it's right or wrong. And this not knowing is what contributes quite a bit to the lack of trust in AI. So if you are creating an AI feature, like a smart feature, and you want people to trust it, you could provide a sandbox or playground experience that lets them just sort of play around with it without consequence. Some might also call this a vibe check. That's like a word I've been hearing with regard to this sort of experience out there, which I think sums it up pretty nicely. So the UI that we're looking at here, I worked with a team that created a gibberish detection model, and we created a UI alongside of it that let users like copy and paste whatever they wanted in there, and you could see if it passed or failed. And there was even that toggle there for leniency, like how strict do you want it or not strict. And it's these sort of experiences that let you like try some things and then have some confidence that it's okay to deploy. Similarly, design and provide lineage experiences. So at Weights and Biases, we've created these experiences that let customers track each model that they create, different versions of the model, but then also what sort of data set and artifacts went into the model. So when a model starts misbehaving, it's a good place to start the investigation on why. A good place is to go back and see sort of like what went into the development of the model. For example, let's say you produced a image model and it was just sort of missing out on showing older people. You might go back to a lineage experience and realize that you trained on a data set that was really heavy with young people. And that gives you an idea of sort of what went wrong and where to start to correct it. And if you then go back and train on a new data set, that will show up in the lineage and you'll have a record of that. And this one's really simple, but just some might say our role as designers is to remind everyone about the human impact of these technologies. Thus, you can be the person in the room, in the meeting that asks tough questions and sort of pokes holes in assumptions about like what we're doing with the technology and why and how it's going to work. Certainly would encourage anyone on any team to do that. But just reflecting on sort of like what designers do to break down complexity in other areas, I think we're well suited for this sort of thing. Okay, the last challenge, and this one's like coming out of left field a little bit, but designing with the threat of obsolescence. So there are lessons here for all designers, not just product designers. AI's impact is undeniable, and there's a possibility that certain design tasks or entire jobs could become obsolete. So optimistically, AI can enhance design, raising both the floor and the ceiling, and in what we can accomplish, basically. Maybe that's something you've heard before. But then pessimistically, it could also replace designers. So how do we plan for a future where AI might take over certain aspects of our work? My first piece of advice here is to design at the strategic level. So as AI evolves, it's possible that more tactical design tasks, such as creating UI, will be automated. However, designers who can think strategically, understand the bigger picture, and sort of tie smaller experiences together will continue to add value. Also, design and build the AI tools or the shovels. So the phrase selling shovels during a gold rush applies here. That may be something that you've heard before. So those who design and build the tools to support AI may remain indispensable. So even if AI becomes more autonomous, the infrastructure and the tools that power it will still need to be created. And this is what we're doing at Weights and Biases. We focus on building these shovels, these tools for AI creators to use. And sometimes the state of product design or where we're at in the journey feels like a little murky, but I have confidence knowing that I'm doing product design for AI, which seems to be like more at the beginning stages of its journey, but we'll see. Become an expert at prompting AI for UI design. We just saw a great example of this with the prompting for a video. So there could be a future where writing prompts to instruct AI could become a valuable skill set. I think someone even asked about that. Like, how do you write prompts and guide people to write good prompts? Designers could essentially transition from creating UI to becoming expert prompters and guiding the AI to deliver the UI. And again, the shift has already begun. I'm sure we've all experimented with getting the right video, the right image, the right text. Okay, my last piece of advice before I start wrapping up here, sell the human touch. And this is absolutely particular to all designers and creatives. And it's frankly in contrast to a lot of what I've said today. But who knows, maybe in the future, while AI might excel at technical tasks, there might remain a value of human-driven, emotional, and artistic design. So products that emphasize originality, creativity, and the human touch could continue to hold appeal. So keep that in mind. That reminds me, I missed something when I was talking about sort of more utilitarian design. In your careers, you might encounter designs that are too utilitarian, and it is at that time to remember the human touch and maybe realize that precisely what an experience needs is the human touch, and that it's maybe a little too stale otherwise. So, um, that's pretty much it. Before I wrap up, feel free to take out your cameras and snap a shot of this and the next screen. This is a summary of the 6 challenges we discussed. So again, these are the challenges you might face in the age of AI as product designers. And then following up on that, here's the 24 pieces of advice that I give to you to make you more resilient as product designers. So you can take a snapshot of this, you can print it out, you can use it as a bingo card. And I'll go ahead and leave it at that. My LinkedIn is there. And I guess we'll move into any questions. Thank you. Gosh, every day, I feel like most designers are just putting out really grand, large visions, and then they quickly get descoped. I'm in the midst of that right now, which is okay. That's part of the sort of jostling to arrive to the right thing to build. Um, the we're always sort of combating the best human experience versus the right cost and the time to build it and the business need. Um, so I'm trying to think what else I can add here that I didn't speak on. I just think it's really valuable to provide that blue sky design because I do think companies will get back to it, and I think more will get built if you show as much as you can of it. Um, and I've had that experience before where we sort of said we're going to do this one chunk now, and then we're going to get back to doing this other chunk. It does happen. It doesn't always feel like it, but it does. And I think if you've got that skill, it's really awesome because you're often facing a lot of like pushback on trying to get as much design as you can in. Um, a few things. I think try to back up all your decisions with like really good data. I think if you can get into like customer anecdotes or maybe you're looking at charts and stuff to see how users are currently using the product, you can really build a case that's sort of hard to refute that it's something that needs to be done. And the reason you're not doing it might be because there's just no time or the cost of it, but you don't want there to be any lack of clarity that it would be good for users. Have a very convincing argument there. I also think you can talk about the larger picture, about what the larger pictures are, or larger goals of the company are. I'll give you an example. We're working on something right now that is essentially sort of like an automated event that happens when something else happens, sort of a if this, then that experience. We have a whole automation system in our platform, and we're sort of going back and forth on like this new thing. Do we rope it into that system, or do we, to get it out quickly, do we make it sort of an independent thing and not tie it back into the larger automation system that we have? And I've been constantly reminding folks that like automation is a real big selling point of our platform. It's a very valuable feature. We want to keep driving people to it. Like, why wouldn't we not take this opportunity to go ahead and build it into the thing that we already have? You can also remind them that like there's such things as like Band-Aid UX, and tell them the ills or the like bad reasons to not just sort of put a Band-Aid on things for the sake of doing it quickly, because there will come a time down the road when there's going to be a price to be paid and you're going to have to go and fix that thing or like do it right. That can be a convincing argument as well. I think it's case specific. I think on the one hand, that could be the product itself. And I'll talk about like recent LLM work right now. I mentioned we came out with a new product recently called Weave that it's essentially a sandbox or playground experience or a whole platform for testing out different LLMs to try and find out which is the right one. Is OpenAI giving you a better experience than like Llama? And you can sort of, there's functions to compare them, evaluate them, put them side by side, look at a whole bunch together. In essence, that's like a big sandbox experience. And that's a whole feature that will take quarters and even years to build out to its full potential. But I do think the example that I showed was a very small experience, a very small UI. A little bit more context on that. We essentially had customers who might deploy this gibberish detection AI to kick out user submissions. And so our customers were sort of deciding if they wanted to use it and deploy it in their own platforms. And they really didn't have the confidence to say how it was going to work. So just this very small experience, while very quick and sort of like a footnote, I think still had a very big effect on their decision to use that model. Yeah, I'm trying to think if there's anything else I can add there. Just consider it, even if it's a very small experience, whenever you sense that there's going to be some hesitation on trusting the model or that users aren't going to know what it does exactly. There's one other sort of point I'll make on explainability that I didn't touch on. Take advantage of like blog posts and documentation and even product announcements to talk about what went into the AI process or what users can expect to get from it. I think, all the big foundational model companies, OpenAI and Meta, it seems that whenever they come out with a new model, it's usually accompanied by a blog post, which is very exciting and it allows us to read about it. If you don't have engineering capacity to make a sandbox experience, like write a blog post about it, and give users some confidence.